Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Emily Lawson, and I am with Five Dynamics and Simplify, and I'm here to present our next speaker. So our next speaker is a talent leader at LinkedIn with a passion for creating and facilitating transformational development experiences. Throughout his career, he's delivered highly successful development programs for leaders at every level. Through his work in coaching, leadership development, team effectiveness, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, he's helped hundreds of people unlock the individual and collective magic and grow careers that they love. I met Kevin only a few short months ago, but I immediately knew that I had to persuade him to come and share his insights with us during today's event. And today, what he's going to be sharing with us is how LinkedIn is applying Five Dynamics to foster connection, build effective teams, and create a common language throughout their organization. So I am very thrilled to present this next speaker to you. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kevin Bishop. Kevin, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Emily. It's great to be here. As Emily mentioned, my name is Kevin Bishop. Just a little bit about me that wasn't covered in the intro. I've been with LinkedIn just since April of this year. Prior to that, so I guess I'm about to hit my 6-month anniversary next week, I think it is. Prior to that, I was with the Kraft Heinz company. So for anyone in the US, you probably know them from ketchup and mac and cheese. So that was an interesting experience. And then prior to that, I've spent most of my career in learning and talent development for professional services organizations. So my time with LinkedIn is, my first experience working with a tech organization, very different than what I'm used to in the past. So I thank you all today for giving me the opportunity to wear a button-up shirt again for the first time in 6 months. The hoodie is all the rage at tech companies. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, as Emily mentioned, I want to talk with you a little bit about how we're using Five Dynamics to really create a common language within our organization and help drive our culture forward. So we're going to talk about where we started with Five Dynamics, where we are currently, and then where we're headed, where we're hoping to go, and how we're hoping to continue to use Five Dynamics to drive our culture forward. Left some time at the end for Q&A, but I'm also a fan of keeping things conversational. So at any point, feel free to put your questions or your comments in the chat or use the raise your hand feature. We can have a conversation here and we can make sure that it's interactive and everyone's questions are getting answered. So where did we start? So several years ago, long before my time with LinkedIn, there was another Kevin Delaney, who was an HRBP for our product org. And he sort of happened upon Five Dynamics at that time and started using it within the product org to help address some needs around team effectiveness and collaboration. Now, the sales org, which is a much larger org within LinkedIn, had been using a tool called Insights. It's a little bit different. They were paying facilitators to come in and do all of these sessions on Insights. So when we introduced Five Dynamics at first, I think people were a little bit confused. They were like, how is this different or similar to Insights? So we had a little work to do in clarifying, exactly what we were using Five Dynamics for. Well, Kevin transitioned into a new role with learning and development, and he brought Five Dynamics with him. He said, this is what I've been using in the product org. I really like it because it's not about personality, it's about work styles. So the L&D team at the time, under his direction, started running workshops throughout the organization, encouraging people to take the assessment and then delivering live in-person workshops to talk about, to help people understand their profiles and then talk about how they can more effectively work with their teams based on what they had learned. So we would get called, I say we, this was before my time, the L&D/TD team would get calls from leaders who would want to do something with their teams around collaboration at their offsite or at their team meeting. So our L&D facilitators were traveling all over. it caught fire within the organization pretty quickly. And so we had people that were running 10 or 20 sessions per month. So this was by far the largest initiative at the time that L&D had undertaken, that was organization or enterprise wide. So at that point, there was no Simpli5 tool, I believe. So we had people in our learning services department running reports and printing individual profile reports so facilitators could pack them and take them on planes. It was apparently a quite crazy time. And at one point, about 40% of the entire company had taken the assessment, and all of those people had been through a workshop with us to help debrief and explain the assessment and how Five Dynamics works. So it was really gaining a reputation within the company, and the L&D team was having, quite honestly, a hard time keeping up with all of the requests for workshops. LinkedIn's culture is very much, they enjoy a workshop. We enjoy a workshop, I should say, since I'm here now. But we found as teams changed, people moved into new roles, they shifted responsibilities. Leaders would still want to do this with their newly forming teams, but also a lot of those people had already been through one of our workshops. So we started thinking, how do we keep it fresh, right? How do we create a version 2 of our workshop that includes new activities, new discussion points, something that will make sure that, Five Dynamics hasn't become stale within the organization. And so there were some plans getting started. And then, as happened to everyone, the pandemic hit in 2020. So everything paused. I think the L&D organization here, as in other companies, was really reevaluating what they needed to prioritize. How would we even deliver content? We're very much used to being live in person. How are we going to shift to digital virtual sessions? What content is most relevant right now to help people through the challenges of the pandemic? So everything kind of got a little bit derailed at that point. But eventually, after a certain period of time, we started offering some virtual workshops, which were very similar to the initial team effectiveness and collaboration workshops that we were delivering initially. So we hadn't made a lot of progress in terms of evolving our approach to using Five Dynamics. We were really just trying to get back on track in this new virtual world. So that's where we started with Five Dynamics. Where we are now, if we fast forward to 2022, we're still delivering mostly virtual workshops, a few in person here and there recently. And again, the focus most heavily has been on collaboration and team effectiveness. I think that will continue to be what we do most with Five Dynamics because people know it within the organization and they request it of us. But we've also started introducing Five Dynamics as a recommended onboarding activity for individuals to help build their self-awareness as they come into the organization. And we've recently rolled out a self-serve option so that team leaders can actually facilitate a Five Dynamics workshop with their own team and without having to rely on a TD facilitator's availability. So we've made some good progress there, putting together some materials, facilitator guides, one pager that will help explain exactly what needs to happen so these leaders can really take this on themselves. One of the things I was charged with when I joined back in April of this year, though, was really to rethink or maybe think in a new way about how we can leverage Five Dynamics differently to really embed the language and help drive our culture forward. So that was that, being high explorer myself, that was a really fun thing to get to think about. So as we all know, an organization's culture is defined by the underlying beliefs, values, principles, and ways of interacting within the organization. And you can see here how we articulate ours. We aspire to create a trusted, caring, inclusive, fun, and transformational experience for each other at LinkedIn and through our platform for every member of the global workforce. I mean, that's no small feat, right? Um, you get into that and you're thinking, okay, every member of the global workforce, that's huge. And LinkedIn, being 19 years old now, has about between 19 and 20,000 employees. So that's a lot of people to create a trusted, caring, inclusive, fun, and transformational experience for. So we really want to think about how do we go about that? Well, we bring our culture to life here at LinkedIn by truly embodying and living our values. So they're also articulated here on this slide. We put members first. We act as one LinkedIn. We trust and care about each other. We embody diversity, inclusion, and belonging, which if you were able to join the first keynote speaker today, great presentation on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We're open, honest, and constructive, and we dream big, get things done, and know how to have fun. When I joined, the values were articulated slightly differently. So this is a bit of a refresh to how we state our values. And I'm really excited about it because it puts our people at the center of everything that we do. And frankly, fun is one of my personal top values. So the fact that it's articulated as an organizational value as well really resonates with me. So as I was thinking about our culture, our values, and the ties to five dynamics, I wanted to think about which dynamics we needed to really lean into in order to bring each of these values to life. So we put members first. This is all about making the right decisions for our platform, the members of our platform. We want to do the right thing, make sure that they can be successful. So as I thought about this, I'm really thinking about explore and excite. So excite being, hey, we want to create connections for all of our members. We're really leaning into the people side. Who are our members? What do we know about them? How can we create new products or develop the products that we have to better serve the people based on what we know about them? And that not only requires some excite because we have to know the people, we have to be able to communicate with our members, but also some explore because we need to be creative. We need to be innovative. We need to be thinking differently than we have in the past because we know our members are, they're out there working in a brand new environment. I'm hesitant to say post-COVID at this point, but hopefully on the downside of COVID here. Um, we act as one LinkedIn. This, again, I think a lot of organizations have values around acting as one organization. Larger organizations specifically often tend to be siloed. So how do we start to break down those silos? How do we really keep the big picture in mind so that we're all working together toward a common vision? This comes to life through our actions. So again, I'm thinking we need to lean into explore and execute. We really have to be able to see that larger picture and how we as individual employees fit into that. How do we serve the larger vision? And what actions do we need to be taking to make sure that we're really moving toward that common vision? We trust and care about each other. I love this value. We always start from a position of trust. We recognize every professional interaction is a chance to practice respect, compassion, honesty, and integrity. To me, it was obvious this leans into excite. It's all about our people. It's all about making sure that the ways we interact are, based in trust and care. So, leaning into excite, leaning into execute again, because it's about our actions that show that we trust and care about one another was really important. We embody diversity, inclusion, and belonging. This is, I think, again, a lot of organizations have values around this now. This is a conversation that is not anywhere near being done within organizations. We're all focused on how we can be more diverse, more inclusive, and create a better sense of belonging for our people. Here we're saying every one of us is responsible for creating this environment where diverse perspectives and experiences are sought out and valued. So we really need to be making those connections with others. We need to lean into Excite to make sure that we are bringing in those diverse perspectives and that we're connecting people to each other so that they can learn from one another as well. And then, there's some examine energy here because for any organization to be successful at meeting their diversity, inclusion, and belonging objectives, there has to be some detailed planning. We have to know within our organization which perspectives or which populations are overrepresented, underrepresented. Who are we hearing from the most? What are they saying? So we really need to gather a lot of data. We really need to put that into a plan so that we can take action to really embody DIBS within LinkedIn. We're open, honest, and constructive. The first time I read this is all about feedback. This is how we talk to each other, how we problem solve together, how we highlight others' potential blind spots. What are the things that others may not be seeing? How do we respectfully, but openly and honestly and constructively call those things out? Here, we really need to lean into that examine energy as we're thinking around problem solving. Again, how are we gathering data? What are we basing our solutions to problems on? What risks might there be? And then we have to be direct in calling those out. I say lean into execute here because one of the potential qualities of people with high levels of execute energy is that their communication style can be very direct. And so we want to make sure that we know what we're sharing with others by making sure we've done the research, but then that we're sharing it in a way that gets to the point. We don't want our trust and care to overpower our open, honest, and constructive communication, which is a risk sometimes within organizations like ours. And then finally, we dream big, get things done, and know how to have fun. Dreaming big, there's an obvious connection to that explore energy, right? That explore dynamic where we're really thinking big picture. We're thinking outside of the box. What could we do that we have never thought of doing before? Get things done, high execute. To stay in business, we've all got to execute to get things done and then know how to have fun. We want to make sure that we're enjoying working together. We're finding joy in our work and the people that we work with. So really leaning into Excite in order to foster those connections and that sense of joy and happiness at work. So this was a really, like I say, a really fun exercise. I know we could make a case that all four dynamics could be aligned to each of these values. But as I was going through this exercise, I was really looking at those dynamics that we most needed to lean into in order to bring them to life. And then thinking about how we can start to embed the language of five dynamics into our culture based on, how we've mapped to our values. So
Kevin, I do have a quick question here from the
yeah,
audience.
absolutely.
Yeah, so Mofida wanted to know, how do you measure the success of implementing your values, and how have you noticed that Five Dynamics has or has not affected that?
Yeah, so I would say we're at the beginning stages of, the five dynamics connection to our values. We're just starting to really incorporate the language, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we're doing that as we go through. But in terms of how we measure our values, it's a great question. I think, a lot of it is anecdotal and observational in terms of how what we're seeing within the organization. But then there's also, as we're going through annual review, this has become part of our conversation, like values and culture. We're not necessarily evaluating people too rigidly on at this point, but we're talking about it as people are, going through the process of evaluating how their work gets done or talking with their manager about their performance. we ensure that our values are part of that conversation. Is that helpful? I know it's not a very it's not a very examined answer.
I think it's perfect. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Sure. Any other questions while we're paused here? All right.
I think I have any additional ones in the chat right now. So we're probably
Okay.
good to keep moving through.
Absolutely. Well, so our culture and our values really inform everything that we do at LinkedIn. We do try to align all of our priorities back to our values. And that includes how we develop our people. And since that's my domain, I started to think about how we could start addressing some of our most pressing development needs using 5 dynamics. So since going through this exercise and then also sort of a needs assessment around development areas, we've uncovered some additional areas beyond just collaboration and team effectiveness that we think 5 dynamics can really be integrated into our approach and therefore help us embed the methodology and the language of 5 dynamics into our daily lives at LinkedIn. So we're now talking about leadership development, leading change, communication, hybrid working, and conflict management. So these are the things that are top of mind for us right now. These are certainly not the only applications that we could use 5 dynamics to help us address. But these are things that we're currently either have begun doing or are in the process of building out some programs or some development sessions based in or grounded in 5 dynamics methodology. So I wanted to share some examples of what we're doing and would love to hear from you, during this conversation, what you may be doing in your own organizations related to 5 dynamics. But these are just some of the ways that we're applying dynamics to some of the development areas that we've uncovered as needing addressed. So I want to pause and give a shout out to Simpli5 as I found a lot of resources on the knowledge base. So if you've not dug into that, I highly encourage you to. But those resources are super helpful in developing the sessions that we created around these examples. So collaboration, as I mentioned, this will continue to be the highest area of focus for us when it comes to 5 dynamics. The teams, as I mentioned, are already familiar with this application of 5 dynamics, and they specifically ask us for it regularly. But to help us re-energize our approach, rather than stick with the general overview session that included a few activities, we really wanted to try and think outside of the box a little bit. And we've started using simulations where teams can really see how the dynamics play out within a specific scenario. Now, we love a good survival simulation. If you're in talent development or if you've been in a talent development program at some point in your career, you may have done similar exercises where you're given a scenario that your team is stranded somewhere and you have this list of items. So you want to rank them as an individual and then as a team, and then you work together to see, which items are most important to the team's survival. It's always a good time. But our approach using 5 dynamics to that sort of an activity is after people have individually ranked their items and after they've ranked them as a team, we ask them to pause and reflect on how they work together to rank those items and how did they do? Give themselves a score. How did the team do with regard to each of the dynamics? Did you spend enough time in explore or did you jump straight to execute? Did you spend all of your time building consensus and you never got to execute, right? So we're really getting people to think about how they're working together on this fictional scenario, but it brings up a great conversation that we can have once the activity is finished around how this plays out in our real lives and our real teams when an energy is either overrepresented or underrepresented within our actual teams. how does our work potentially suffer? How could it be better if we leaned into, the dynamics that may be underrepresented there? So sometimes we create teams specifically that are all high execute or all high excite to really drive home the point that when those energies are overrepresented on a team, certain things get missed. I will share like one of my favorite exercises of this particular activity, one of the favorite sessions I've done. I had a high explore team all working together, and they had a whole story about how they were going to go out and, hunt animals and make clothes for themselves. And it got really creative and really interesting. So it's a slightly competitive way for people to interact and see how those dynamics can interact in real time. Communication. So we found some great applications around communication recently at an executives leadership team offsite. We were discussing how important it is for leaders to be able to communicate effectively with their people, and how our own preferences for how we like to receive information often inform how we deliver information to others. But that doesn't always land with every audience, depending on the energetic profile of those on the receiving end of the communication. So we really have to be able to tailor our approach to communication based on what we know of our audience. And during that session, I broke the execs leadership team into two groups and told them that I was going to ask them to prepare a short but very important presentation. Now, the audience for group one was high explore and high excite, and the audience for group two was high examine and high execute. So the topic I gave them was how to ride a bike. So leaders at this level immediately started laughing. They were like, oh, this is silly. But then they started to get into it. They started to have a little bit of fun with it. And after a short time of preparation, we came back together and they presented these presentations. And group one, who had the high explore, high excite audience, their presentation was really collaborative. They drew a picture of a beautiful sunset over the horizon. They explained all the possibilities that riding a bike could open up to a person. They did a live demonstration of like what it's like to hold on to the handlebars and move the pedals. And they discussed how much fun it would be, which was a really interesting approach to how to ride a bike. Now, group two, whose audience was high examine, high execute, took a very different approach. They created a bulleted list in black and white. They had access to other colors, but they chose black and white of all the technical steps to riding a bike. And then they explained them all in meticulous detail. So we all had a good laugh at this, but it really opened up, again, a great dialogue about how to communicate effectively with people based on what you know of their energetic profile. We talked about how people with high explore energy would be energized by all of the possibilities of riding a bike, all the things that become opened up to them because of riding a bike. How those with high excite energy might not enjoy the solo aspect of bike riding, and they might want to know what sort of biking communities might exist. How those with high examine would want to know all the risks, what happens if I fall off the bike? What are all the safety rules to biking? And how those with high execute would probably just take the bike out of the trainer's hands and ask to be pointed to the nearest trail, right? So while it was really fun, it really did help leaders see that the way they communicate can be more effective once they know their people a little bit better and they know a little bit more about their energetic profiles. And all of them did commit to taking this back and really thinking through their own teams and how they can better communicate with them. So that was a great application as well. Leadership development, another executive leadership team offsite. We wanted to discuss how to lead through challenges. And in this session, I gave the team a case study to read and to discuss. I love the story of the Best Buy turnaround led by former CEO and chairman Hubert Joly. And as they read and discussed the case in small groups, I asked them to identify where Jolie had leaned into each of the dynamics as he was transforming the organization. Where was he ideating and innovating? How was he really rallying people around his idea, which was really radical for this organization? When did he lean into the detailed planning? And at what points was it important that he jumped right into execute? Now, I have no idea if Hubert Joly knows five dynamics or not, but we found some great examples of how and where he put them to use, either knowingly or otherwise. And as we discussed some of the key takeaways from that case study, I asked the team to reflect on their own teams, their own leadership journeys, the challenges that they were facing in leading their teams currently, and then to make some notes about how they can effectively lean into each of those dynamics to help them navigate some of those challenges. Individual teams within LinkedIn probably don't have the same level of challenge as turning around an entire, hundreds of thousands of persons organization. So really, there are some lessons we can take from what he did there and apply to our own leadership journeys. Hybrid working, this is a solution that's currently in development. Hybrid, as you all probably know, is presenting leaders with some new challenges. We're not all fully remote, but we're also not all co-located. And leaders are often struggling to manage their dispersed teams in an equitable way. So for this session, what we're planning to do is to give the general overview of five dynamics to make sure that we level set and everyone understands the language that we'll be using. And then we want to discuss the challenges related to each of these dynamics, given this new hybrid environment we're in. And I can say from my own experience, I'm finding that we often skip over the explore and excite dynamics and jump into planning and execution, which I know is common in corporate in general, but it seems to really have a bigger impact even when we're in this hybrid world where we have limited time in video meetings, and we seem to focus a lot of that time on building our plan and checking things off of lists without necessarily having a clear picture of what it is we need to achieve and who needs to be involved. We jump to that planning, to that action. Now, that's my experience and my observation, but there are teams who are reporting that the opposite. They spend all of their time ideating and never quite get to executing. And that's a challenge that I've heard about as well. So we want to discuss with our people not only what's getting missed in terms of which dynamics are being overlooked or over indexed on, but we also want to address some tools that can help us bridge the hybrid gap related to each of these dynamics. So for instance, for Explore, what tools can help hybrid teams collectively brainstorm? If you're not all co-located, how do you use tools like Miro boards or Jamboards or even whiteboarding within our video conferencing platforms? These are things that certain pockets of people know about and are using, but not everyone in the organization is using it effectively. So we really want to take this broad to the organization and introduce some of those tools. For Excite, what technologies and tools will we be using to connect with people and communicate more effectively? We know that with hybrid, communication is paramount to a team being able to be successful. Being hybrid, I may be co-located with one person. We have a conversation in the hallway. I need to remember and to go back to my laptop and let the rest of the team who may not be co-located with us know, hey, we just had this great idea come up, so that we can make sure that our approach to tackling problems is inclusive and the work is getting done in an equitable way. For Examine, we're considering what project management tools are being used within the organization and making people aware of those so that they can stay on track with their plans. They can build effective plans. And then for Execute, what sorts of productivity technology will be helpful in making sure everyone is executing in an efficient way? So more to come as we build this out, but this is something we're very excited about. I will say we had another internal program here, that was trying to address hybrid, but it wasn't necessarily giving people specific tools. I think people were leaving those sessions saying, this is great. We had a chance to talk about some of those challenges, but what can I do about it? This session, we really want to give people specific things that they can do and the tools with which to do those things, and frame it all in the context of five dynamics, because it's such a great model of how, it's based on our fundamental workflow for any project that we undertake. So more to come, as I say, as we build this out. And speaking of building out, we've not yet begun to work on our leading change or our conflict management solutions. But for leading change, I'm really envisioning bringing leaders together to talk through how people with high energies in each of these dynamics may respond to change differently, right? And really applying that to how you lead your team. If you know you have a team who is all high, examine, it may take more time for people to get on board with change. And here's why. They're going to want to know the plan. They're going to want to know all of the risks. So we really want to open those discussions and give people some tips and tools that they can use to help lead change. And then similarly for conflict management, digging into how our differences in our energetic profiles can sometimes lead to tension or conflict, and how once we're aware of those and we have the language to use, we can dial up or down certain energies to help manage it and have better conversations around conflict management. So I've just said a lot about what's on our plate currently. I just, again, want to pause for any questions or comments.
Let's see. I believe we do have a question speaking specifically for small companies. If we are wanting to use 5D's language in our workplace, where do you advise is a good place to start? And then also, second part of that is knowing how much work would go into that initiative. Would you suggest establishing a team specifically for that?
Yeah, I think, what I've found to be most effective is sort of a, a bottom up and a top down approach. So, and this may be different within a smaller organization. I think, the grassroots approach may work quite well in a smaller organization, but really, wherever you can start to incorporate the language into what it is you're doing. So whether that's onboarding, that's a great entry point, right? Everyone is just learning about the culture of the organization. If you can introduce it there, fantastic. And then if you can get your executives to also use it as they're addressing the organization as a whole, that reinforces that language. I don't know if you need a specific team. I think I would need to know more about the organization to know whether a specific team dedicated to that would be helpful. We don't have a specific team dedicated just to five dynamics, but what we're trying to do is kind of take that grassroots approach by introducing it in various places within some of our development opportunities and development programs, and also at every level. So that's the thing, these executive team offsites that I was talking about earlier, doing sessions there has really paid off, because a couple of weeks ago, we were, excuse me, we were at a gathering of the entire finance org, which was about 700 people, a mix of in-person, mostly in-person, some virtual attendees. But without being prompted, one of the executives from one of my sessions earlier this year started talking about his five dynamics profile and how within the leadership team that played out. And he was kind of making a joke about how he was the only person with high explore energy on the team, and how the CFO sometimes got on his case about needing to lean into execute a little bit more, which he also has high execute energy. But then the other panelists started sort of riffing on that. And so people were hearing the language being used by the top leadership in the organization in a sort of casual way, which was really helpful in, driving it home within the broader organization and driving adoption. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I would say top down and bottom up approach is what I would recommend.
That's perfect. Thank you, Kevin. It
Yeah.
doesn't look like I have any additional questions in the chat. And I know we've had a few people kind of join us a little more recently. So if you do have any questions for Kevin as he's going along, feel free to send those over in the chat and we'll make sure they get answered.
Yeah, so, well, obviously we're working on a lot over here, and we really do love Five Dynamics. It's got a special reputation within our organization, and so we really want to build on that and leverage that in all that we're doing. Uh, in my short time here, I've been here not quite 6 months yet. I am seeing that people are picking up the language and using it more and more, which is really an indicator that it is becoming a bigger part of our culture. And it is going to help us, when we're having conversations about trust and care about one another, about how we need to lean into excite. And we're starting to have those conversations more and more. So as I see this taking hold within the organization, I really do start to get excited for all of the things that we can do. And the possibilities really are endless. We're talking about diversity, inclusion, and belonging as being one of our values. How do we start to talk about it through the lens of Five Dynamics? Giving effective feedback. This is, people have told us this is a real need within the organization. We just went through our annual review process. So how can we really start to talk about it using this language that people are starting to become familiar with? Coaching, innovation, joy, humor, and happiness at work. I loved the question that came up in one of the first keynote today around happiness related to belonging. Total side note, but Annie McKee has done some great research on how happiness at work is really grounded in purpose, friendships, and hope. So how can we start to talk more about that through the lens of Five Dynamics? Inspirational leadership. Had a great conversation with some leaders recently where we were talking about how we needed to lean into excite and use that language with our people that's really going to rally people and make them feel motivated and inspired. Resilience, burnout, these are huge topics right now. How do we talk about it, using the lens of Five Dynamics? Maybe we're over indexing on dynamics where we have lower energy. So how do we start to address all of these things using this common language that we really are building within the organization? So I could go on and on and on. And as someone with high explore energy, I really am excited to dig in and start thinking about some of these possibilities in more depth as we continue to drive our culture forward, with the help of Five Dynamics. So that's what I had to share with you today. I know we've paused for questions a couple of times, but I want to once more for any questions or comments or anything you'd like to share about creative ways you're using Five Dynamics within your own organization. We can all learn from one another here.
Kevin, we do have a question that came in from Susan.
Yeah.
She wants to know, how does your team handle any questions about this relative to other tools, such as leadership circles, Enneagram style measurement, etc.? I know 5D is different, but I'm facing a barrage of these questions myself.
Yeah, we get that a lot as well. And we also get requests for Enneagram and other tools. We really frame it as the difference being Five Dynamics is really focused on our work styles. It's not about personality. It's not about, excuse me. It's not about personality. It's not about capability. It's really about our energetic preferences and it's centered around the workflow, which is different than a lot of other assessments. And trust me, I'm an assessment nerd, so I've done tons of them. But the framing of it being, really related to the work that's getting done rather than a personality preference or that sort of thing is helpful for us. We also have sort of started limiting, frankly, the other types of assessments that we're doing, or at least sanctioning from a talent development perspective, we really want to use five dynamics rather than some of these other tools out there so that we can have this common language and that we're not confusing things, by talking about, leaning into this dynamic, but then in another conversation, we're talking about how extroversion, and introversion based on Myers-Briggs is something. So we really are trying to be focused in order to help us build that sort of differentiation.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let's see. And we've got just a couple of minutes here before this session ends. So I just want to leave just a moment for any remaining questions anyone has for Kevin.
Well, if not, I'm happy to connect with you all on LinkedIn's platform. If you're interested, I would love to make some new connections and, continue the discussion and learn from all of you how you're using five dynamics within your organization. So please do reach out at any point. Kevin Bishop, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I'm the bald guy with the glasses and the flowery sweater. So please do connect, and I will look forward to hearing about all of your adventures with five dynamics as well. So thank you all so much for your time.
Kevin, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today. This was fantastic. I really appreciate it. I just want to let everyone know that we have about a 10-minute break, maybe a couple of extra minutes as well. And then we've got a couple more sessions that are coming up immediately afterwards at noon Central. So don't forget to check out those. And Kevin, thank you again so much for your time today. And if anyone has any more questions, let us know. But thank you.
Thank you all.